Hello, hello, my girlie. Welcome to Talks with SAE, the only late night, thought provoking, giggle inducing podcast for my ladies whose days melt into their nights. Tonight, I want to dive into what it really means to be an introvert. This episode is a bit different from the rest of the episodes in that it kind of just happened, and it happened because of yesterday. So, yesterday was Thanksgiving here in the United States. I had three separate socializing events I had to attend. While I was preparing for the last one, I kept thinking, I'm so worried, I'm so scared, I'm so nervous. And when I came back from the event, all I kept thinking was, I'm seriously an introvert. I was feeling really guilty because I'm like, why can't I just be on, But then I also started thinking, why am I thinking like this? Why am I trying to make myself out to be something I'm not? Like, there's nothing wrong with me. So I used to think there was something wrong with me. And tonight made me realize that to an extent, I still have that ideology that being an introvert means there's something wrong with me. I'd walk into a room full of people, and while everyone else seemed to just fall naturally into conversations with ease, I'd feel this overwhelming pressure to perform, to honestly be something I wasn't. They'd ask questions, they'd, throw out comments, and I'd sit there listening, just processing what was being said, but too often I was hesitant to speak because I was thinking so much and I kept thinking, what are they saying? What are they trying to say? There was also this voice in my head telling me that because I wasn't speaking up, I wasn't contributing, I wasn't engaging, and maybe I wasn't good enough. But that voice was wrong because over time, I've come to realize that being an introvert doesn't mean that I'm less capable or less valuable. It just means that I experience the world in a different way. It means that my personal superpower is the ability to observe, to think deeply, and to listen without interruption. And I think that's something the world doesn't always understand. Introverts, we often operate from a space of quiet strength. We don't need the constant noise or validation from others to feel seen. We're people who thrive in spaces where silence is accepted, where deep thought is valued over quick answers. We listen more than we speak, but when we do speak, it's usually with intention, it's usually with depth and with care. And I think there's power in that kind of energy. I think there's power in navigating life in that type of way. While others are busy performing or trying to be on all the time, we're learning, we're processing, we're observing, and we're trying to understand. And to me, that's a quiet power. And I know I'm not alone in that. Introverts are often told to be more outgoing or to just put yourself out there. But what happens when we do that, when we push ourselves to constantly engage in a way that doesn't feel natural to us, we burn out. We lose a bit of ourselves in the process. We end up giving parts of our energy to things and people who aren't really worth it. And on top of that, we forget that the best thing we can do for ourselves is embrace being introverts rather than forcing ourselves into molds and people that just don't fit, right? And over the years, I've learned that my introversion isn't a flaw that needs to be fixed. It's not something I need to apologize for. It's what allows me to see the world differently. It's what allows me to connect with people on a deeper level and to create meaningful work that reflects my true self. What makes it a superpower is owning it. We don't need to change who we are to be successful, to be loved, or be respected. I think we just need to embrace our authentic selves. I cannot tell you how many times I've had people tell me that I'm shy, or how many times people have complained that I come off as uninterested when that's not the case at all. We're misunderstood. The reality is we care very deeply, but it's in a way that doesn't always demand attention, you know? And I think because of that, our relationships are often more meaningful because we invest our energy into a select few rather than spreading ourselves thin, trying to please everyone and trying to be for everyone. We don't need to speak the loudest to be heard. Our value is inherent in the way we show up for the people who matter most. and just in the way that we show up in this world in general. And then there's this other thing where I've had this like push and pull inside me that's really hard to explain to someone who isn't an introvert. On one hand, I crave connection. I want to build authentic relationships with people who understand me, who get where I'm coming from, who don't mind the silences and the pauses. But then on the other hand, I need my solitude, and I need it the way that I need air and water. There are times when I just need to be alone with my thoughts, where I just need to recharge, I need to reflect, I need to reset. And it's this strange, sometimes balanced thing between wanting to be connected and needing to recoup. And it's one of the hardest things to navigate in a world that like constantly tells us we should always be out there. We should always be socializing, interacting, showing up. For us introverts, socializing can be a lot like running a marathon. It takes a lot of mental energy, even when you're surrounded by the people you enjoy, by the people you trust, by the people that make you feel safe. It's still a lot of energy. And after that energy is drained, after that energy is gone, we need time to recover. But what no one tells you is how that recovery time is essential to our well being. I think as introverts, we often find ourselves feeling completely drained after a social event. And that's how I felt tonight. Like, after the first event, I genuinely wanted to cancel the last two. I was so exhausted. All of that talking, all of that listening, all of that interaction took a lot out of me because I wanted to be as present as possible at that event. And knowing I had two more was a lot. And I felt like I was starting to lose myself. And I ended up taking a nap in between the other two events. What I'm trying to say is, we often feel completely drained after a social event, even if we had a great time. And all of the events I went to, I had an amazing time. It's very rare that I have a terrible time or I have a bad time at any event I attend, but I still feel exhausted after each one because it's like a part of us, it's like a part of me has been emptied. And then we need that solitude to refill, to recoup. But then, even with the need for space, even with the need for resetting, it's never that simple. There's this constant tension between wanting to stay in your bubble and needing human connection. Sometimes when I've been alone for too long, I start to feel like I'm losing touch with the world. I begin to feel like isolated, like I'm missing out on valuable time and experiences with things and people that matter to me. And that's when the fear starts creeping in that maybe I'm not being social enough, that I'm falling behind, or even worse, that like I'm somehow broken because I need so much alone time. But I have to remind myself, and you have to remind yourself, that it's not brokenness. It's just the way that I'm wired, and it's the way that we're wired as introverts. And I think the key that my experiences and my life has taught me is that we can exist in both worlds, right? We can exist in the world of solitude and we can exist in the world of connection. We don't have to choose one over the other. I've learned to give myself permission to be alone when I need it without guilt, and to also go out and socialize when I feel energized to do so. Sometimes the best way I can connect with others is by first connecting with myself, by taking time to center myself, to reflect on my thoughts, on my experiences, on my boundaries, and to also process what's going on inside of me. Because after doing all of those things, that's when I can show up fully for other people. That's when I can show up fully in these events. I want to mention, like, I'm not talking about socializing just at events, socializing in general, Something that I've learned in this life is that you can be an introvert and you can crave connection at the same time. Like, as human beings, we are social creatures, and that means that we all crave connection one way or another, including introverts. Just because you're an introvert and crave connection at the same time, that doesn't make you any less authentic or any less worthy of those deep, fulfilling relationships. I think it just means that you approach connection differently. Because I know for me, I approach connection differently. The challenge is navigating a world that doesn't always get it. It's hard to explain to someone why you can't attend every event or why you can't constantly be available. Because if you're completely honest about it, people get offended. I would love to tell a lot of people, I don't want to go because I don't want to, I'm not going to go because I don't want to go. People get so offended by that. They think that you are like upset with them or whatever, when the reality is like, I'm not upset. I just don't want to go because it's going to take so much energy out of me. And I want to use the time that I could be at that thing with all of you to just be with myself because I need to be with myself right now. But then at the same time, the more that I've embraced this, the more that I've realized that push and pull is where my personal strength lies. And I think that's where a lot of our strength as introverts lies. We don't have to choose one over the other. We need to learn how to live in that tension and allow ourselves to move freely between the two and move authentically between the two. Because the weight of the external expectations can be exhausting. From the moment we're born, there's this subtle, unspoken pressure to be out there in the world, to be visible, to be loud, to constantly engage. And as introverts, it's a struggle. We're often told, whether directly to our face or indirectly, that in order to succeed, to be seen as worthy in society, we have to always be on the go, always making connections, always networking, and always performing. But as introverts, all of this doesn't come naturally to us. And so the pressure to fit into this mold leaves us feeling like we're failing or like we're missing something. And that's how I used to feel when I was younger. And if you're someone that feels that way, please know that that's not true. And what no one ever talks about is how exhausting it is to try to meet the expectations of a society that doesn't honor introversion. When you're expected to always be social, to constantly network, to attend every gathering, to maintain this upbeat, energetic persona, it's not just mentally exhausting, but it's so incredibly emotionally draining. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've pushed myself to attend events, to network with people, only to come home feeling so empty, so drained, so disconnected from myself. And then the thing is, it's not that I don't like people. It's the energy that is required from me and of me to engage with so many people in such a shallow way that leaves me feeling like I'm wasting parts of myself. The most valuable commodity in this world is time. And I don't want to waste my time because in this life, we get one shot. We live once, and I want my life to be full of authenticity. And having to put on a show because that's what society values is so exhausting. It's so exhausting. Like, success for an introvert might look like deep meaningful connections with a few people or working on projects that are aligned with our values in quiet spaces. And that's where we often have the upper hand, I think. We know how to focus deeply. We know how to work in solitude. We know how to create things that last. And this isn't a dig at extroverts, by the way. I'm just speaking from my experience as an introvert, especially as one that is surrounded by extroverts. We scroll through Instagram or TikTok and we see that everyone is living their quote unquote best lives. Always out and about, going to events, meeting up with friends, traveling, or just doing something exciting. So there's this constant reminder that life is about being social, about being visible, and constantly being on. But that narrative is so exhausting. It's so exhausting when you're someone who thrives in solitude, who recharges in quiet spaces. The pressure to keep up with the loud, fast-paced and extroverted world of social media is so overwhelming. It leaves you feeling like you're doing something wrong because you're not posting your every move, you're not attending every party or gathering or event, or because you're not sharing your social interactions on a constant loop. And I can completely attest to this because, as someone who completely does not understand social media, but also someone who has been feeling very, I want to get off of this, it's been so exhausting for me personally being on Instagram. And it's been to the extent where, because I've been doing so much thinking about being an introvert tonight and this entire day, I think I'm coming to the conclusion that I just have to get off Instagram, because being on Instagram, it feels like I'm surrounded by so much of the opposite of what I need as an introvert. And I know you know what I'm talking about. Even if you're not an introvert, you know exactly what I'm talking about when I say how exhausting certain social media platforms like Instagram have become. And the thing is, I feel like social media doesn't account for the fact that introverts often need downtime to recharge, which makes sense because it's social media, right? But it doesn't reflect the reality that not everyone wants to share their life in real time. And the algorithms seem to punish those that don't do that. Right. And just to like keep going with social media, because we're talking about social media right now, I think there's this like belief that being visible online somehow equates to being successful, right? But obviously, that's not true, because so many introverts are successful in their own way without needing to constantly be out on social media or be out in public. Success doesn't have to look like what you see on someone else's feed. It can be quietly working on a passion project, having deep conversations with a select group of people. I think it's important to remember that as an introvert, your value isn't tied to how often you post or how much attention you get on social media. Your value is in the work you do, the relationships you cultivate, and the peace you maintain with yourself, with this life, and with others. You know, the pressure to perform for an audience is something that I think we're constantly battling. And I want to say it's not about rejecting social media entirely, because if you want to be on social media, go on social media, my girlie, go on social media. It's about finding a balance that works for you, not what the algorithm is telling you. You don't need to post just to post. You don't need to be on all the time to prove that you're worthy. And being an introvert means that sometimes the best moments are the ones that don't make it on social media. I think in a world that constantly demands more, as introverts, we have the power to say enough. No, no more. We can choose what we share, when we share it, and how we engage with the online world. And social media can be a tool for connection for all of us, but it doesn't have to define who you are or how you engage in this world or how you engage with the world. Our lives don't have to look like anyone else's. When it comes to relationships, I've always found comfort in quality over quantity. I think it's not about collecting as many friends as possible for us or trying to be seen as popular. I think we're so often mislabeled as loners. I've had people say that to me, but the reality is we value deep, meaningful connections much more than we do shallow interactions. The times that I am interactive, the times that I am social, I'm 150% present. I'm 150% supportive. No one can ever say she's inauthentic, she's not herself. And by the way, as an introvert, almost all of my relationships, my close relationships, are with extroverts because somehow we've been able to balance each other out. And I think that's very important to mention, because maybe you're thinking, like, oh, as an introvert, I only need to have introvert friends or introverted people within my close circle. No, you don't. You definitely need some extroverts in your life because they will balance you out. I promise you. And you'll be able to balance them out. It's lovely when we can balance each other out. This life is about balance, right? The one thing I've had to learn is that downtime isn't a luxury for us. It's a necessity. I used to feel so guilty about taking time for myself. Sundays have historically been self care Sundays where I reset and I turn off any communication so that I can just be with myself. But in the last couple of years, I've really disconnected with self care Sundays, and I've noticed that I've lost myself a lot because I haven't had those moments of reflection, of resetting, because I'm just saying yes all the time. And tonight has made me realize those have to come back. So I hope that as an introvert, you yourself have your own day where you just get to spend it with you. And if it's not a day, I hope you have at the very least an hour just for you, and you get away from everything and you come back to yourself. You fall in love with yourself all over again. You assess you as an individual, as a person in this world. You assess who you are, what you want, and you just spend time with you. The world tells us that productivity is king, right? That we should always be working, we should always be busy, we should always be hustling. I've learned that as introverts, we lose sight of ourselves when we keep pushing and pushing and pushing without pausing. And more than that, we miss out on the benefits of being able to quietly reflect. Downtime is more than just a break. It's honestly a vital part of our creative process, of our mental health, and of our personal growth. And I'm speaking from experience. I've been feeling like I've been in a fog for so long. A big part of that is because I have not been spending time with myself. I have not been reflecting. I have not been resetting or recouping. I have not had downtime. As introverts, we absolutely need solitude to process the world around us. Because during these moments of solitude, that's when we find clarity, we find insight, we find inspiration. When I look back into all of my quiet, recharging moments, my self care Sundays, that's when I've been able to find the most clarity. That's when I've been able to be the most creative, the most productive, because I got to really spend time with myself. I got to really take care of me as a woman, as an individual. And there's this misconception that as introverts, we're antisocial or that we don't enjoy being around people. The truth is, we need downtime to process our experiences and our emotions. I know for me, after tonight, I'm not going to any events or socializing for at least a week because I want to process my experiences tonight. I want to really take them in. I want to really reflect on them. I want to really celebrate them with myself before I move on to the next thing. We need that space, we need that downtime to really be able to show up for others in a way that is meaningful, in a way that allows us to be present without exhausting ourselves. Because when we're constantly on the go, we don't have the energy to connect deeply or to think critically about the things that matter most. I think it's only when we allow ourselves the space to rest and recharge that we can give our best to the people and projects that deserve it. Sometimes I find that when I'm feeling overwhelmed, it's because I've neglected my need for solitude. The noise of the world, like whether it's from work, social media, or even the people around me, it becomes too much. In those moments, the most efficient and healthy thing I can do, not just for myself, but for others, is to step away and give myself permission to be quiet, to be still, to be with me again. It's not about avoiding the world. It's about creating space for myself so that I can come back stronger, so that I can come back focused, so I can come back more present. If you like I hope you know that if you're an introvert, realize that downtime doesn't just restore your energy, it sparks your creativity. Some of our best ideas come in the quiet moments when we're left alone with our thoughts. Because it's in these moments that we have the freedom to dream, the freedom to create, the freedom to make sense of the world. But then when we make space for reflection, ideas start floating again. It's why it's so important to recognize the value of this time, because without it, we lose our ability to create and innovate. So if you're an introvert who feels guilty about taking time for themselves, let this be your reminder that downtime is a necessity for all of us, but especially for us introverts. When you honor your need for downtime, you allow yourself to be the best version of you, and know that in this life, you only get one chance. You get one shot in this life. So be present, be the most you can be in it, and embrace your introversion. Embrace the fact that you're not the loudest. Embrace the fact that you hesitate. Embrace the fact that you are quiet. Embrace the fact that you think deeper. Embrace the fact that you think before you speak. Embrace the fact that you need to recharge. Embrace the fact that you are much more selective. Embrace it. There's strength in who you are. It is an art. Please don't ever let anyone or society make you feel like you're not enough because you're an introvert. And that's it for tonight's episode, my girlie. Thank you for joining me this evening. I'm so glad to have you on this journey. If you've enjoyed this episode, go ahead and tap that follow or subscribe button and leave a review. It lets me and the algorithms know you're really here to grow, learn, and say. You can also find me and Talks with SAE on Instagram at Talks with SAE. And be sure to share this episode and the podcast with your girlies so they can say as well. Again, thank you, my girlie, for joining me, and more importantly, thank you for existing. Until next time, self-love bells.